Welcome to Divorcing Strong, the podcast that pulls no punches when it comes to divorce. I'm Becky Sampson, better known as Bulldog Becky Brockovich, and I'm here to give you the straight talk, the strategies, and the subpoena secrets you won't hear anywhere else. With expert guests and proven advice, you'll learn your rights, your options, and gain your power that encourages a fair and equitable outcome. Divorce doesn't have to break you. It can build you. Let's get to it. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Divorcing Strong podcast. Of course, I am your host, Becky Sampson. And I have to say, I'm a little excited. I'm always excited for my guests, okay? But as I was preparing for this one, I have a personal interest because many of you don't know this, but I grew up on a summer camp for kids, or I should say my parents and mostly my dad ran a summer adventure camp in central Utah for 46 years. So I have this little part of me that is ingrained about youth and building youth. And I wanted to just share real quick this thing that my dad, or his motto of our camp, was build a better youth for a brighter future. And so today's guest, we're going to talk a lot about youth and kids and leadership and all that fun stuff. So we're going to be diving into a topic that many people overlook during divorce. So how to empower our kids through the difficulties of divorce. And so my guest, Lorraine Connell, I hope I got that right, sorry, is a teen leadership expert, educator, and the founder of Peers Not Fears, where she helps young people discover the strength and leadership that already lives inside of them. With over 2 decades of education, in education and leadership development, Lorraine knows firsthand that kids don't need to be rescued. They need to be seen, heard, and equipped. Oh, I love that. We're going to talk a lot more about that. So she is the author of A Teacher's Story, How One Act of Leadership Inspired Many, and Your Voice Matters, uncovering your unique leadership, a leadership workbook. And she's on a mission to prove that leaders aren't born. They're built through resilience, reflection, and support. In a world where divorce can shake a child's sense of stability, Lorraine's work reminds us that transition can also be transformation, opportunities to teach courage, empathy, and confidence. So please welcome to the show, Lorraine.
Hi, thank you so much. It's like we can just stop right there. All the information you need to know is in my intro.
I know. I took a liberty and did my own little thing, because I always love to see what people, when I guest on other shows, I'm like, okay, what? Seriously, I did all that stuff? Like,
so fun.
It is fun. And I really appreciate you taking the time today, because I really am excited to talk about this, because our youth is one of the things in divorce that we really do over. I haven't done any show like this, but yes, we talk about co-parenting and how it affects kids and things like that. But I love that you're about the leadership and self-development of children. And if we don't take care of the children, we are neglecting our future.
Oh,
and so, yes. So tell us a little bit. I love starting off the podcast with just where did you come from? What's your background? What got you to here? And what makes you passionate about being in the work that you're in?
Well, if you want me to go back, we can go back to when I was a teenager, and I got all of these messages that I was a friend, but I wasn't super popular. I played a couple of sports, but I wasn't the best on the team. I was like academically driven, but there was no way I was the smartest person in the room. And so the messages that I received through all of that was that I just wasn't enough. I wasn't a leader. And
which is so normal.
And everybody receives that message, because in reality, in schools, in athletic competitions, and even in companies today, it's really just 10%. 10% of the population is identified as a leader with a title, right? And so we're all walking around getting these messages. And it was when I was teaching, and I taught chemistry. And the link between chemistry and leadership is that I can get kids to do hard things.
Yeah.
Chemistry is hard. Anybody who's listening right now is like, ugh, chills when I talk about chemistry. But every kid that was in my classroom knew that they could be successful in chemistry because it wasn't about who could do it the best. It was about getting it to be possible for everybody in my classroom, which is the same thing in leadership. And
Yes.
when I started to see my students, when I started looking, but when I started to see them reflecting that behavior of or feeling of not enough to me, that's when something really shifted for me. And it was about, I, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. And I was like pretty close to the end of my career in teaching. But I knew there had to be a better way to meet all kids with the ability to develop those skills. And
Yeah.
my favorite kids to work with are the kids who are like, "Are you talking to somebody else? Because I'm not a leader," right? Because
Isn't that just so interesting? I mean, you can tell the kind of background that they come from. And even like, because we talk about divorce and stuff, the ones that are under a lot of pressure, their self-esteem is affected by that. And they feel like I'm feeling so out of control and I, I'm not good enough. I never will be good enough. I'm not giving enough chances. And sometimes in the school, I did not do well in school. I just didn't. I was one of those people that I never felt like I was going to be good enough, and had people that told me I'd never be successful in school.
Mhm.
So I love that you are looking specifically for that in that child and being like, I'm going after that. Like, I'm
Yeah.
going to develop that.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and I think it connects. I don't I don't work directly with kids of divorce, but every kid has a story, right?
Yes.
And if divorce is the story, then that child needs somebody to say,
I
"I
see you.
see you."
Yeah. I
Because
see
the
you.
parents, like, they're making all of these decisions
Yeah.
with the kid in mind, but nobody is engaging in conversation with the child because we feel like, and this is the same thing that's happening everywhere in every situation, is
Mhm.
we don't want to pull them in. We don't want to drag them down or hurt them. And so we think we are protecting.
Yeah.
And it's coming from a place that is so good. But the reality is that's not the message that the teenagers are receiving or the youth are receiving. What they're receiving is that it doesn't matter what I want. It doesn't matter that I am part of this system too.
Mm.
And it's happening in schools. Like as a teacher, I didn't ask my kids what they wanted to learn. I didn't, as a parent, I never asked my kids if they would do something. I just told them to do it.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
how does that make it different? I mean, that's probably a big factor. I mean, talk about that is about when you give children choices, it does build leadership. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, and I one of the biggest misnomers in leadership is that you have to have all of these skills. And
Mhm.
so I will often ask a room of students, a room of adults, like, what do you think the requirement to being a leader is? And I say right off the bat, there's only one. There's one requirement. And so, like, if your listeners are in their head
Like
right
trying
now
to figure it
thinking
out.
about it, right? You have one, right? You're like, "Oh, just one?" Like, there's so many.
Yeah.
But everything you're thinking is a skill that a leader can develop. The requirement is that you make a decision.
Yeah.
Because in making a decision, you're going in one direction or another. That's the leadership, right? Going in a direction, you're leading yourself, right? And then from there, everything else is a building skill.
Yeah. So you're saying basically, and that's one of the things that I love that when I was studying about you is that you really are leadership is not born,
Mm-mm.
right? You can develop it and through the resilience. And I mean, one of the things is going through divorce. I remember as a teenager, I mean, I haven't talked about this at all, actually. My parents were considering, I ran away from home. I was one of those kids. I'm like, you know what? I'm out, bounce, went to a totally different state. And I wasn't doing anything bad. I just wasn't doing well in school and I didn't feel good. And so I decided to go live with my cousin. But in the process of doing that, my parents, I think, were talking about divorce, and I was like freaking out. I was like, I need to be back with my family if that's my life's about to go sideways.
Right.
And growing up at a summer camp, we were leadership was built into us at a very young age, because many times we were put in circumstances with these kids that we had to step up because we were the owner's kids,
Right. Right.
And so leadership was definitely something. And I always say to my mom, I said, I think that's the reason why all 5 of us are very resilient, are very out there. We're very well respected by many people. And I say that with humility, but because of the experiences that we've had. So talk a little bit about that. Is like, what kind of experiences can a parent give their children? I mean, yes, divorce is, it's going to happen, but what are some other things that you can do to help develop those skills within your kids?
I think what it is that we have to step aside. I think we're so quick to protect and avoid the pain that we don't want our children to experience. And we've been through it all. So we know the pain that's going to happen. But if we don't let them make the decision and make the choices, they're not going to learn. That protection is, again, coming from a wonderful place. But without those experiences, I think of my own child right now is really struggling at setting an alarm and getting up on time. And I keep going into his room and making sure he's awake.
Yeah.
He's not learning anything. And that's evidence because I'm still going into his room. So what I have to do, and this is the hardest part, is let him fail and let him be late for school and let that happen, so that it's important to him to make sure he understands whatever the miss is around waking up on time. I'm helping him avoid learning what it is.
Well, and really, I think one of the messages I talked to my mom about this too, is that when you jump in and do something for someone, a child or even someone else, that they can do for themselves. My dad always said, he had all these little one-liners that he'd always say. He says, don't do for someone else what they can do for themselves. Like I'd be like, Dad, I want you to put my saddle on my horse. And he's like, Becky, you're capable. But when you do it, it's basically telling that person, like your child, that you're not capable. I don't believe in you. I do believe in you. And there's natural consequences to your actions if you don't do it. And and it's hard. So talk a little bit about how that is difficult for parents sometimes, because it's really a reflection on them, or they think it's a reflection on them.
Well, everything that our teens do, it comes back to bringing up the trauma, or whatever you want to call the teenage experience for ourselves, right? There was like breakups, there was friendship schisms, there was maybe not being successful in school. And so when we start to see those things happening with our children, we put up barriers so that they won't feel the pain that we are feeling again. And so it's about, like, I guess it's still like doing our own work first. And one of my favorite podcasts, this is so awkward. They always say, leave your bags at the door, right? So whenever I'm having a conversation with a teenager, I can't bring my experiences in, because it's not their experience. And when I do that, it negates their experience.
Yeah, it really robs. And that's what my dad always said, he's like, you're robbing that child or that youth of building that skill and that ability, or that muscle, so to speak. To be able to do. I remember there was a story. There was a girl once that had been through some really horrific abuse, And
Mhm.
she came to our camp once, and I was on a rock climbing trip with her, and she was terrified to get up on the rock. And she got up there to go rock climbing, and I said, no, you can do it. You can do it. And she's like, I can't do it. I said, this is so my dad. He'd be like, okay, Becky. So my dad wasn't there, but I got down and I said, I will belay you. Okay. Or no, sorry, you belay me. She was a teenager. I said, you're going to take the leadership role and you're going to guide me up this mountain. And so I think I was 17 or something. And so of course we tied her to a tree because I was bigger than she was. And she walked me up that crack. That's what the rock
Mhm.
climbing. And by the time I came back, she had the confidence. She's like, okay, I can do this. So she got up and went and did it. And she remember her turning to me and going, I've never had that opportunity to be able to, I had been up that crack a million times, right? So I didn't need her leadership. She needed that opportunity to be a leader, especially in somebody that was older than her. And I was taking her direction, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So it's so important. And I can't tell you how many times my dad got letters from parents going, what did you do to my kid?
Right? Right. It's life-changing,
Yeah.
right? And it's about letting them I really think it's about letting them fail
Yeah.
because when they make I think of this all the time. I have an 18-year-old and like he's going to be leaving my house soon and I'm not going to be able to tell him to put that drink down. Don't drink that. Don't take that medicine. Don't do that or whatever. I have to trust that he has the skills to know what to do in those situations.
Yeah.
And I think, what you shared about letting that younger person do the belaying, it it put them in a space of like, I can't fail. I
Yeah.
can't not do this,
Yeah.
right? And it's so important. And it talks so much of that resilience when we believe that a kid can't do something we send that message more than just verbally, right? Like I may never say to a student in my classroom, like, I don't think you can do this chemistry. Like those words were never iterated.
No.
But like I am sure that I could have conveyed that thought with my body, with what I did with, giving them this or that or putting them with someone. And so for me, in my classroom, in the work that I do with the students and the youth that I'm working with is I say go, right? You're the only person that's going to hold you back. If I'm the person holding you back, then you'll never be able to achieve anything.
Right.
So I have to get out of the way, and that's what I do when I'm working with teens in group setting at schools is I just we play games, and when you play games, like, the failure doesn't matter as much,
Yep.
but you build that resilience. It's like when they would come to camp, it didn't carry the same weight as grades do in school.
Yep.
Like, it's important, and sometimes it's more like life or death, really, but it's taking away the pressure that is arbitrary. We don't realize it's there, and
Yeah.
we let them just play and break and build, and that's where that resilience is coming in.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you saying that because I think that is when we allow our youth, I should say, to fail. I don't really believe in failure. I think it's really an opportunity to learn what works, what doesn't work, right?
Yes.
And how many of us adults feel that way too? Be like, I don't want to take a step because I'm afraid to fail. I'm like,
Right,
my
right.
dad, and I told you this right before we started this, is that my dad used to always say to me, Becky, when you get bucked off that horse, you get right back up on that horse and you tell who's boss and keep going. And
Mhm.
I truly, I was bucked off a lot when I was a kid because I was terrified of the big animals, and they could sense that. So I got
Mm.
thrown off so many times. But what that taught me was get right back up quickly after you fall.
Mhm.
You've got to get back up and you've got to take control of the situation or whatever it is and say, okay, what did I learn? What worked? What didn't work? And I also love that you brought up the fact it's like, make it playful. Give
Yes.
your kids things to play so that it's not this heavy, like A to F grade.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I think of when you were telling that story about having the young girl do the actual helping,
Mhm.
how often as adults are we afraid to ask for help?
Yeah.
And when we don't ask for help, we're essentially robbing someone else the opportunity to
To
offer
serve.
help.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about that an awful lot in the current culture in our communities and with our youth. Like, we require community service in a
Mm,
lot of schools, and the intent is to do something good.
mm.
But what about reminding them that the feeling that they get when they offer that service is more for them than the group that they're
Yep.
serving.
Yep. I hate to keep making references back to our camp, but my dad used to call them work parties.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the work every Saturday morning. It was the work parties giving back to the camp, whether you're
Mm,
fixing cabins or digging ditches or raking leaves, you were giving back to
yeah.
this community that had given to you. And I loved that opportunity because sometimes kids were like, I don't want to do this. But, years later at our reunions, people were just like, I remember those times. And I
Right.
remember all of the times the car broke down and that we had to hike out here. So it's those experiences. Again, we kind of, it's actually, let me ask you this question and let you answer it. But how do kids build resilience? I mean, how do you help them with their mindset to looking at these things in their life? They're difficult. It could be divorce. It could be other things are really working for them, not to them.
Well, I think, I talk a lot about the zones of comfort, and we're always told to step out of our comfort zone, but we're never told that there's a zone beyond that
Mm,
challenge zone, which is called your panic zone.
yeah.
And in that zone, you go into survival. And so you'll see the fight, you'll see the flight, you'll see the freeze, and you'll see the fawning
Yeah.
from anyone in that zone. And so what I talk about is you're too outside of where you're able to learn. So there are a lot of different ways. And one of those ways is to reach out to somebody who is in their comfort zone, because you're not learning in your comfort zone either.
Right. Right.
So by reaching your hand out, if I'm in the comfort zone, to somebody who's in their panic zone, I'm actually building my own resilience while helping them form ideas on how they can develop their own resilience too. And so I think so much of what we think is that we have to do it on our own,
Yeah.
right? I have to figure out how to be resilient on my own. But in reality, it's about building that resilience in community. And so that's,
Mm,
I'll talk to my teens and my youth about those zones, and then we'll play a game, right? We'll do an activity, and I'll pause it in the middle, and I'd be like, how many people had to do this? And they were like, a couple people will raise their hands, and I'll say, did you actually have to? And they'll be like,
mhm.
oh, maybe I didn't. And so
Maybe
it's
that's a choice.
right. And so
Yeah.
we just start having these conversations about, oh, has anybody ever told you that it's so easy? And they're like, yes, they say that to me all the time. And I'm like, that's because it's so easy for them. Right.
Mhm.
And so we're all operating in and out of our zones of comfort in different situations for different people. And so if you can have some kind of conversation like that with your teenager, your
Yeah.
youth, all of a sudden you have a way to verbalize feelings that are shutting you down, right? And I think of, in divorce, there's a lot of fighting.
Yeah.
And is that fight happening because somebody is outside of their comfort zone, their challenge zone, and
Mhm.
you have pushed them beyond a boundary in which they know how to communicate? Because
Mhm.
I see it with my youth all the time. When I tell that kid who's been gotten in trouble for all of his behaviors that he's a leader, he fights me because that's what he knows. That's what he believes is supposed to happen. And when I don't fight back and I don't even register like there's a consequence to that behavior,
Yep.
it like stops him in his tracks. And he's
Yep.
like,
Well, he's seen. He's
right.
seen. I mean, that's how I was as a teenager. Is, unfortunately, I only felt like my dad saw me, but he knew I was a leader. He
Yeah.
was like, Becky, yeah, I worry least about you because you're a fighter. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so that is so interesting, and I appreciate that you did that with him. Is that you saw beyond the behavior, because
Mhm.
many of those rebelling are just wanting to be heard and seen. And
Mhm.
once they're acknowledged, they're kind of like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
really? And they only need one person to believe in them.
I
One.
know, I know. And that's what like my workbook, the very first line in my workbook is somebody sees something special in you.
Yeah.
And I wish that, I mean, I know there were people who saw something in me, but they never like made that explicit. And I
Mhm.
think if I had known that I didn't have to be the smartest, the most popular, the most athletic, the most confident and loud person in the room to lead others, I wonder what I could have accomplished sooner in my life.
What do you think is really at the core of the such high competition for youth right now?
Um, there's this belief that we all have to get to college. There's this belief that to be successful, it looks like
Yes.
this one thing. To get to college, you have to be the smartest. And I think we've made college so competitive when in reality, it's not. There's so many colleges out there that want each and every one of our teens the way they are. But somewhere, somehow, we've gotten and given the message there's only one path.
Mm.
And in my podcast, where I interview leaders today, and I say, tell me what it was like to be you as a teenager. The stories are never straight. They're never straight lines.
Of course they're not.
But
Because
at
leaders,
16, those kids believe they have to know what the rest of their
yeah,
life is going to be.
yeah. 100%. I think that is one of I think that it's just so unfortunate to me that, and leadership is, there's leaders that are out there in the front and in the public eye, and there's leaders. I remember when I was in my early 20s, we were talking about this very thing, like that some people have talents to listen.
Mhm.
When I was younger, that wasn't me. That's the reason why I do podcasting for the last 16 years, is I've had to learn how to listen
And uh-huh.
and respond. And so that was just my thing. But there are some amazing people that have talents on all the spectrum, which are all leadership. So I wish we would be more. Usually we look at the people that are talented, that can sing and that can dance and can do all of this stuff, or do podcasts or do radio, and go, oh my gosh, they're amazing. But there's just so many unspoken leaders that
Yeah.
are not, that lead quietly or lead methodically, or that lead with patience and
Mm.
kindness and compassion, that is so much more, sometimes more powerful than the ones that are out there. And I love that you said that they come in all different shapes and forms, and leadership is not a straight path. I mean, it's getting up on the horse and falling, and getting on the horse
It
and falling,
really
and getting on the,
is. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of advice would you give, I mean, specifically to parents? How do they look at each one of their children, especially when they're going through something as traumatic as divorce, and foster the leadership in each one of them separately? What would be one of the first steps that you'd recommend they do?
I've been thinking about something that I do with teachers is when we label kids, right? And
Yeah,
parents
we talk
label
about that.
kids all the time. This is my shy daughter. This is
Yeah.
my athletic child, and so those labels, they're not good or bad,
No.
but it's how the person who gets labeled interprets that label. And I did this activity with a group of teachers where I gave them the stereotypical types of students, right? So the shy child, the athlete, the student council president, the valedictorian. And I asked them, I think I had like 8 or 9 different categories. And I asked them to embody the behavior of that person and challenge the group to pick them to be a leader who would go to a conference and come back and report or represent. And it was at the very end, I was like, did any of our shy students get nominated? And everybody was like, no. And I was like, why do you think that is? And how does this play out in your classroom? It's like, if I had to be the shy kid, I'm going to not ever put my hand forward. And if I had to be the one to nominate and convince the team that I should go, they're never going to do that. So that for me is one of the lessons that still haunts me, is that shy child is never going to say, pick me.
Well, so yes. And there's different personalities. I've done a lot of self-development, right? There's different personalities. There's the go-getter, to the peacemaker, to the, and so everybody kind of holds their role, but it is interesting, what you said about labeling him and keeping him in that box, because there's leadership in every personality type.
Absolutely.
Right. And you made me think of, I went to a leadership program with 72 women, maybe it was 82 women. I don't know what it was, a couple of years ago. And they had us do this activity, which I thought was fabulous, was that we had to, as everybody had a turn, everyone had a turn. And what they did is that they would give us instructions, very basic, like clean the windows, clean the table, sweep this, do that. But the people that were following us had to do exactly what we told them to do. I'm like, oh, clean the window or clean the table. And they're like, boop. Now what? And they're like, okay, now you need to clean the table with the rag. Then you've got to wipe this way, this, you know what I mean? What kind of leader are you? Are you going to lead people to do a good job or a mediocre job? And I think it's interesting to play around with that idea, but removing the labels, but using their strengths, and let them lead in a way, give them some positions, even if they're shy, to get them out of that comfort zone. Like you said, they don't stretch if they're not out of that comfort zone.
Right. Well, and I think so many of our youth don't know what it feels like to be in that challenge zone, right? Yeah. So it's like, as soon as they step outside of their comfort zone, they're immediately in their panic zone. And so we've got to build the challenge zone out from the comfort zone slowly.
Yeah.
So that they know. I mean, that's the other thing, is that I don't think very many of our youth know what discomfort feels like in a healthy way. Right.
I love that you said that, in a healthy way.
Yeah.
How to manage that outside of the comfort zone and use it for your advantage.
Right.
Oh.
And I think by telling them that the zone in between comfort and panic is where learning, that's the only place that learning happens. So if, I'll say to parents, ask your kid how much time they spent in their comfort zone today. How much time did they spend in their panic zone? Because a lot of times what we see when they get home is that they're finally comfortable and everything they've been holding together is just exploded out at home when they're safe.
And then you get frustrated with them, right?
We absolutely do.
Yeah, you get super frustrated.
We've been doing the same thing at work all day.
Yeah.
We've been holding ourselves in, and we come home where it's safe and everything explodes for us.
Well, and I think that an important part, I remember I was talking to a counselor last year about this very thing of like, why do they just like blow up when they get home? And she's like, because they finally feel safe. And so kind of navigating, what are some tools that you would recommend navigating that? Like, okay, now they feel safe, but without going into total,
I think one of the things that I encourage parents to do is explore what recharges the parent's battery, what recharges the child's battery, so that when we enter our safe place, we can recharge our batteries first.
Yeah.
and then come to community in our family. And it's not an easy thing to know what recharges your battery, but like if you can take a week of vacation or a weekend and see where does your child find time and space that makes them feel safe, warm, and fuzzy inside,
Right.
that's what recharges their battery, and make that be accessible when they get home. And the younger they are, the more they need to recharge that battery the first time when they walk in that door. Because if they can't recharge their battery, they're just going to continue to look for the way to recharge their battery. And we think that it's like, if I fight, if I push, that's going to recharge me. But it's about like allowing that space and time, and for a parent too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, the thought that came to my mind is going back to what we talked about when we first started this podcast, is that you were talking about giving them choices, letting
Mhm.
them come up with
Yes.
their own recharge. Okay, look, I can see it's stressful for you, stressful for me. How, what's a plan that we can create together that helps, that I can respect your boundaries for needing to recharge, and let
Right.
them come up with that. They're going to be more invested in it.
Yeah.
I've always
Yes.
believed, and although I've never had children myself, I did work with a lot of youth at our camp, and many came from many different backgrounds. And
Mhm.
one thing we had one camper that came from a very wealthy family, and he would come when he'd fly in every year, because he came from many, many years. He'd be like, take me to the thrift store. I don't want anybody to know I come from money. I just
Mm.
want to be me. I don't want to
Yeah.
have to be anybody else. And when he grew up, he didn't want to take over his dad's business. He wanted to do his own like screen show, and his
Mhm.
dad was really upset with him. Like, you don't want to take over this huge. He's like, no, but he just, allowing kids to be themselves and what they want to be when they want to be it will be one of the greatest ways to build that leadership, in whatever way that they choose to do. And give them that agency and believe in them,
Right.
right?
Right.
Oh, I love it. So tell me, kind of as a wrapping up,
Yeah.
how do you help families and youth, and what does that look like if they reach out to you, if they want to work with you on a group basis with the kids, or
Yeah.
one-on-one? Yeah.
So obviously I talk to the parents first, and because they pay the bills.
Yeah.
But the parents, what I will say is that it's a conversation that you want to have with your child about, like, is this work for them or is this work for your relationship?
Right.
And if the work is for the child, then I'll work one-on-one with the kid. And I always encourage that youth to
Yeah.
have these conversations with their parents, because the work that I'm doing with the kid is often work that the parent needs to do.
Yep.
But like, we never got that training. We never got those skills. And so I'll just always say, you probably should like teach your mom about the comfort zone and ask her questions, right? So it's like, another sneaky way of building leadership, right?
Yeah.
Asking the kid to engage in this conversation with their parent is
Yeah.
like, oh, mom, uh, I've got value here, right?
Yep.
The mom and the dad think, or the parents or the guardians or whatever, we're always coming from that experience of like, I know better.
Yeah.
But in today's day and age, we don't. We don't.
Hmm. Well, kids, that's a normal thing though, for kids to be like, I know better than mom and dad. And then they become
I
mom and dad,
know,
and
but
they're
it's
like,
actually true now. Sometimes they actually know better.
that is true. But what I love is this, and my mom and I had a horrible relationship growing up. We are now very, very close.
Mm,
And so we had to go through our own experience. She just had to learn that she was not going to be what influenced me when I was a kid. My father passed away actually when I was 23. And so it gave us an opportunity to then start building our relationship. But it took a lot of years of communication, of trust. Even now today, she's just like, Becky, we still butt heads sometimes. I'm like, I know, but we're okay. We realize that
yeah.
that's part of the process. And we have to respect each other's boundaries and respect each other's agency. My journey has been very different than the rest of my siblings. Doesn't mean I got in trouble, doesn't mean I really did anything, but I just needed my own space to do it my own way.
Yeah.
And I truly honor and respect the journey that I've been on, because there's been people like you in my path that have been like, Becky, you got it. You're doing it. It just wasn't my mom when I was a teenager.
Right.
Right. And she's so funny. She's like, at my funeral, you're going to be speaking at my funeral, but you're my main speaker, because you need to let parents know that all that work that you do with a crazy teenager when they're going nuts, it actually can turn around. Just hang in there, just keep going and keep believing in your kids. And she really is a beautiful mother. I just didn't see it back then. So yeah, definitely believe that. So, all right, I'm going to put on here actually how people can reach you. Let me just see. See, this is what happens when I have it right behind here. Okay, so you can go to your website, Peers Not Fears, to work with Lorraine. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing what you do. And we could talk forever.
We could. I know. I really could talk about this forever. I have my workbook on that website too, and linked to my podcast. So, there's lots of ways to work with me that doesn't cost any money. So
yeah, no. And I appreciate that, because when people are going through divorce, sometimes they're in panic mode. And, also, just to keep in mind, and I know there's so much that parents have on their mind while they're going through that process, but this could be happening for your kids, not to your kids. Meaning, if the way that you handle it can really help them become more resilient in their life and not ruin them. So it really depends on how you choose to support your kids and get people around you that actually know how to do that. So thank you so much for doing that. So hang in there real quick. Hold on. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on this episode, talking about teens and making them strong and leadership, even through something that's so difficult as it becomes with divorce. Because sometimes I think kids get forgotten, and this could be an opportunity for them to build the resilience that they need to be able to go make a difference in the world, because truly their voices do matter. Just like what Lorraine says. I always say that you matter and your kids matter. So thank you for joining us today. Make sure to like and share this episode with other people who need to hear this message. We appreciate it, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Divorcing Strong podcast. This episode is sponsored by Only Subpoenas, where we make subpoenas simple, powerful, and 100% compliant. If you're having a hard time getting the information you need to settle for a fair and equitable divorce, let us help you. Whether you're an attorney or you're navigating divorce on your own, subpoenas can uncover the truth, secure the evidence you need, and level the playing field. To see how we can help, book an appointment by visiting our website at onlysubpoenas.com.